22 years old when I came to prison.
I was 30 years old when I went to prison.
I was at the age of 19. I had just turned 19.
Hi, I'm Chris, and I help life-sentenced men transition from institutionalized prison life back into society. Every one of our men has already served 25 to 45 years in prison. I serve on the board of the Corrections Transition Program at Everglades Correctional Institution in Miami, Florida. I teach these men life skills and how to speak, listen, and think, so when they get paroled, they become assets to their communities rather than liabilities of the state. Welcome to Men Going Home. I'm Chris Wolfe, and we've got another great show for you today because we are the only show that brings you access to a segment of society very few people know anything about. Men who have spent more than 30, 35, and even 40 years in prison. We'll talk to them about their crimes, their life in prison, and what their transition back into the free world was like after all those years. Now, before we welcome our special guest, please welcome my good friend and co-host of this show, Andy Corge. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be here. Eager to meet and get to know more about Barry Stevens, our guest here today, and good to be here.
Last week's show, before we introduce our guest today, but last week's show was fascinating because we had our first female guest on the show who had done 2.5 years in prison, and she was an open book, no?
She was, and actually we got a comment from Josh here in Miami, emailed us at truecrimemiami@gmail.com, and he said, incredibly candid and engaging guest. She was such an open book that the binder was busted open. She really was. I mean, the one thing I loved about Casey was she was very open and honest about, her life and her life in crime and what sort of led her there. And it was kind of obvious to me what led her there. Drug addiction, promiscuity, and an ordeal she had with her father at 3 that really seemed to have a lasting impact on her. Very dysfunctional parenting with parents that were on drugs and alcohol.
Somebody exposed themselves to her at a very young age, and then the father took her to that man's house and, as she said, beat him half to death right in front of her. And I think that affected her throughout her entire life.
Yeah, for sure it did. And that the alcohol and the drugs led to unwanted pregnancies, children in her life that she couldn't take care of. I mean, it was a mess, and ultimately to the crimes that put her in prison.
And she was tremendously open towards the end when she talked about when she found out she was expecting her fourth child. She had already been using crystal meth for 3.5-4 months, and she talked about the effects of crystal meth on her child.
Yeah, she got very emotional in the interview, and it was really intense. And the thing I loved about her was her resilience. I mean, she is one resilient young lady. You can click on the link in the description to view all of the Men Going Home interviews, Casey's included, on YouTube. And if you're on the go, remember our podcasts are available on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, anywhere you listen to your podcast entertainment.
And we'll introduce our first guest because when we talk about resilience, he is an example of a very, very resilient man. Today's special guest was sentenced to life in prison after being convicted of first-degree murder and armed robbery at the age of 17. He survived 30 years in Florida's most violent prisons, was paroled in 2018, and he is here today to tell his compelling story. Please welcome our friend, Mr. Barry Stevens. Barry, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I'm glad you guys will have me here.
It's interesting. I actually met you at the Corrections Transition Program back when you came in around 2016 or 2017, but you had been at Everglades Correctional Institution for 8 years prior to that, correct?
Yes, since like February of 2010.
Now, you were born and raised in Fort Lauderdale, correct?
Correct.
Now, what's interesting about your story is that when you were only 2 months old, your mother, who already had her hands full with 7 other children, asked a cousin of yours, who already had 3 children of her own, to take responsibility of you and raise you for the early years,
Well, at
correct?
that time, she didn't have any kids, so I'm older than them. So she had those
Okay.
3 later.
So your cousin who had no children accepted you and raised you for the first couple of years, well, for the first 9 years of your life. Talk about that.
So it was a great upbringing. She was a very caring woman. She had a decent job, so she was able to provide for me. At the time, I was the only kid, and then she had a son. She ended up having a son 2 years later. So she thought that she couldn't have kids. So that was the reason she asked my mom to let her have me. And my mom felt like that was a better situation with her having 7 kids at home, recently divorced, And so it was a win-win situation for me and for my mom,
Right, because your mother was a single mother,
Yeah.
and she worked as a domestic worker.
Yeah.
She cleaned houses, and she already had 7 children.
Yes.
And then 5 years later, there was a 5-year gap. You
Yeah.
came along, so I'm assuming you were a bit of a surprise.
Most definitely.
So your cousin stepped in and really, sort of saved the day and helped out.
Yeah.
So then she actually had children of her own later, correct? Your cousin.
Yes.
Are you still in contact with those children?
Oh, yes.
So now, when you were 9 years old, you went back to live with your biological mother, correct?
Yes.
How did that occur? What happened?
Well, at that time, I had started getting in trouble, having fights in school, and so she felt like, okay, well, it's time for you to go back to your mom. You know what I'm saying? You became a handful. She already had. Well, at that time, she only had 1 kid, was me and her other son, my brother Kevin. So she was like, okay, so it's time for you to go back to your mom then, because your behavior is spiraling out of control. And it was normal stuff to get in fights and stuff, and a lot of stuff, I probably could have explained better, but at that young age, I didn't know how to express myself properly, and some of the stuff I didn't even start. But I had an issue with really explaining myself. So once I got into something, it was just that, and I just let people believe. I always had an attitude. I didn't really care what other people thought. So if you believe that's how it happened, then okay. That's how
So
it
for the
happened.
first 9 years of your life, you grew up where your cousin was really your mother figure.
Yes.
Did you, during that 9-year period of time, did you have any contact with your biological mother?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so you saw her on a regular basis.
Yes.
And you knew she was your biological
Yes,
mother.
Yes. So it was never a secret. So once I was old enough to understand, she explained it to me. I
And you
spent
had
time
contact with your biological brothers and sisters.
Yes.
Okay. So you moved back and you're living with your mother. You're 9 years old.
Yes.
She was a hard-working woman.
Yes, she was.
Was she a loving woman?
Yes, she was.
Nurturing woman?
Yes.
So
She
you
wasn't
had
a very affectionate woman, but you definitely knew that the love was there, and there's nothing she wouldn't do to make sure that you were comfortable and safe. She worked hard. Like I said, she worked ceaselessly, 2-3 jobs at a time,
So you go back, you're 9 years old, you're probably in 3rd grade. Were you a good student?
At times.
At times. Yeah. Did you like school?
At times, I should say. So certain subjects interested me, and so I excelled in those subjects, and the ones that didn't, I didn't excel in, and that's one of the things you gotta understand. Like, how can you get an A in science and an F in history, but that was just the story of my life. If I was interested, I was locked in. But,
Now, you're a big guy. You're 6'3", 230.
oh, well, no, I'm 280.
280 now? Well, 230 in prison. You get out, you gain a little weight.
He's more like a defensive end.
Yeah. Because
he's
you
a
were
big
an
boy.
athlete in high school, correct?
Yes.
In school.
Yes.
You played basketball?
Basketball, football.
And what position on the basketball team were you?
I'm center.
You were the center?
Yes.
And then on football, what position did you play?
Mostly defensive end.
All right. You were,
Yeah, I told you he was a defensive end.
Yeah, you were a big guy. You were a big guy. So now you didn't. You didn't actually graduate from high school, correct?
No, so I ended up becoming incarcerated at the age of 17. So
Right.
I ended up getting my GED. And
Right. So you were an okay student through elementary school, junior high, and then you were incarcerated right after you turned 17. But before we get there, tell me a little bit about your father.
well, my father was not really a prominent figure in my life. We had interactions. We may have spent 5 or 6 sessions in each
Together?
other's presence. I spent more time with his brother, my uncle. God bless
So your
him.
father, he was your biological father, but he really wasn't a part of your life growing up.
Not at all.
He wasn't there for guidance or financial support.
No, none of that.
Nothing. And you said you spent more time with his brother than him.
Yeah, his brother and his sister.
Do you maintain a relationship with all of them, his side of the family?
Yes. Well, most of those have passed, but the ones recently, I took a trip to when I first got out. Took a trip to Alabama to meet one of my aunts on his side. My oldest living aunt on that side there, and I met some of my cousins and stuff like
nice.
that. So it was nice.
So now you go back to live with your mother at age 9, age 12, age 13, you're hanging out a lot on the street. You start smoking marijuana, and you start selling marijuana. Talk about that.
Yeah, so my mom was working at night at that time. She was working day and night, I should say. She was working during the day as a domestic, and at night she was cleaning the planes at the airport. So she had a second job at night, and so that left me a lot of time to just go out and wander around and hang out. And I used to hang out in all the exciting spots for a 12-year-old. You see the lights flashing and everything, the pool rooms. Hey, this is a nice spot. Let me go in and see what these grown people up to. So, I put on my little duds, put my little hat on, and I go in there.
At 12 and 13?
Yeah.
So what time did you stay out until?
Well, she used to come home around about midnight, so I could hang out till about 11:30 with no problem,
And you need to make sure you were home when she got there.
Yeah. Sometime I might have been a little later, but, by the time she get in and get dressed and undressed and everything, I've been snuck back in the house. And, I was back there in the back room or something,
Right.
So you were hanging out at these pool halls and on the streets till about 11:30 at night, selling some pot.
Yeah.
And then you'd get up in the morning and go to school.
Yeah.
So when I asked you how old you were when you committed your first crime, you said 12, 13, you started selling some pot.
Yeah.
And then at 15, you upped the ante a little bit. You start selling crack.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah, so a friend of mine one time, I think I wanted to get an outfit or something, or he had a nice outfit on, and I was like, man, that's nice. But it looked kind of expensive. Be like, yeah, man, what you got to do is if you can come up with $20, you can go buy you what they call a parlay back in those days. So it was a juggler, or what they call, for the dealers, they go buy them in large chunks.
In bulk.
And
then they cut them up.
Yeah, so I could go get one for $20, cut it in half, and sell each one of them for $10 a piece. I mean, buy one for $10 and go and cut it in half and sell it for $10 a piece and make $20 off of it.
Right.
And then you take those 20 and you go and buy you 2 more and you cut them in half and you make 40,
So how much money, you're 15 years old, how much money were you making a week selling crack cocaine?
So I didn't sell every day, but when I did sell, it was easy to make $100, $200 a day.
Wow. That was good money back then.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you look younger than you are, but you're actually 50 years old, correct?
Yes, 50. I just turned 50 in February.
Now, so you were actually living a bit of a double life because you were in school during the day and then you were out until almost midnight on the streets selling crack cocaine, correct?
Yeah, I was definitely living a double life.
And you're just selling it to people driving by in cars looking,
just standing
that
on the
sort of
corners.
thing.
Yeah, people come by looking for crack.
And in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah. You run to the car. And that was part of the excitement. You run to the car, beat the other guys to the car, see who make the sale first.
I mean, I could tell, when I met you years ago at Everglades Correctional Institute, you're a very, polite guy. You were brought up very well.
Yeah. My mom definitely instilled all that, and my cousin, they definitely instilled that.
But at that time, did you have any discipline or structure in your life?
Yes, outside, like I said, the biggest thing was I had too much time. Too much time. So
Unsupervised time.
Unsupervised time, that's what I mean, yeah.
Was your mother strict?
Yes.
She was strict. I mean, she worked a lot. She came home, but
yeah, she didn't play.
She didn't play.
Yeah.
Was in the neighborhood you worked in Fort Lauderdale, did you have opportunities as a kid to maybe get involved in programs or things that would maybe occupy your time? Or that opportunity wasn't really there for you?
Not really. I mean, there probably was some programs around, but some either they cost money, which made it a non-opportunity,
right?
Or they were too far away. You needed transportation there and back. And mom didn't have time to drop me off there and that because she'd get up early in the morning, go to work, and then come home for a little while and go to work again.
Right.
All right, 1986. You're 15 years old. You step up the game, and I see this so often. We do, Andy, where it starts out as pretty innocent crime, selling pot, and then it sort of escalates to more violent crime. And when you're 15, you started committing armed robberies. Talk about that.
And so it started. It started with somebody selling crack, and somebody came through with a gun for cheap because the crack addicts, they would sell everything for cheap, and I bought like a pistol for like $20.
Okay.
And then we were in a dice game shooting craps one day, and the guy decided not to pay.
So you were gambling, and the guy didn't want to pay you,
Yeah, so
and you had
because I
just
was
bought a
young.
gun.
Yeah, and I was young. He feel like he didn't have to pay me, and he didn't want to pay me. I'm not paying anything, so I pull out the gun. I'm like, you gonna get my money? So I took all of his money, and a couple other guys ran off, so I took all the money, and that's probably was my first robbery.
That was your first robbery?
Yeah.
You remember how much it was? How much money you got?
I'm not even sure. Probably maybe about $200 or $300.
So you actually started robbing almost by accident. It just
Yeah.
sort of fell in your lap. But
Yeah.
then you started targeting people for robberies.
Yeah. So,
Who did you target?
So at first I was targeting drug dealers. You know, guys would come by to buy the jugglers I was telling you about. They might come by to buy 20, 30.
Now, so people understand, when you say jugglers, they
Yeah.
dealt specifically with crack cocaine?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yes. So they would come through and they would buy the ones that were big that they can cut in half and double their profits with. So when guys come over there and they're looking for it, so a lot of times, guy would ride through different neighborhoods and like, hey, anybody over here got any jugglers? Anybody got any parlays? And I was like, yeah, come over here. Yeah, I got them. And then I rob them. You know.
So wait, but take us through that again. So would you actually set up drug deals and then rob the people?
No, actually, I wouldn't set it up. They would actually just come through looking. So at that time, during the crack era, every neighborhood used to have somebody that was selling what they call the jugglers or the parlays. And so the drug dealers would come to those neighborhoods. So sometimes their neighborhood might be out. So they'll ride through other neighborhoods and like, hey, anybody over here got parlays? So they'll just come by asking, anybody got parlays? They're going to drive on the drug strips. Anybody got parlays? I'm like, yeah, they sell them around the corner or whatever. Somebody drive around. Hey, somebody over here got parlays? I'm like, yeah, I got some over here. What you trying to get? Man, I'm trying to get 100, Oh, yeah? Okay. I got you. I need this money, man. Y'all look like y'all up to something, and then they pull the money out, and then I pull the pistol out.
They pull the money out, you pull out the gun, and you rob them.
I mean, it's a rough business. Was there retaliation?
Not really, because it was pretty much my neighborhood, so guys don't really come back. They'll come back looking through, but I'm not there. Once I leave, I'm good to the next robbery, So
Did you ever think about the consequences of getting caught, or that wasn't even thought about?
No, that was probably the first time, and then when I saw was no consequence, and I was a lot more lucky than I was smart, and nobody ever came back for me. So I'm like, hey.
How much was your biggest take on a robbery from a crack dealer?
Probably about like $6,000.
$6,000.
Yeah, it was like 3 guys in the car, and all of them were trying to buy something. It was like a drought on drugs, and so they were looking anywhere, and they were like, man, I want to buy 200. I want to buy 300. I'm like, yeah, okay, come over here. Come over by this alley. I got you. And at this time, I'm set up. Now this time I was set up waiting for somebody to come through. So
Yeah.
I got a bag, a big bag, Ziploc bag with nothing in it but some crushed cut up peanuts. I'm like, yeah. So how many you trying to get? I'm trying to get. Yeah, y'all come on over here. And then I rob all of them.
So that was 1986. $6,000 was a lot of money.
Yeah, a lot of money.
So, did you have can you take us through, I think you sort of have, but you said you had about 20 or 30 robberies like this.
Yeah.
So take us through the average robbery and how did it go down? Somebody would come looking for coke.
Yeah.
Boom. And then they'd pull out the money.
And
You'd pull out the gun.
Yeah.
And they're still in their car, typically.
Yeah, they're still in the car.
Oh, still in their car.
Yeah.
Did you ever see any of ththese victims again? Did you ever run across them?
A few times, but they didn't notice me and they didn't recognize me. So, because most of these deals go down at nighttime, and so you sit out with my hat on, pull down low.
Right.
But then you escalated it a little bit, and you thought of yourself as an opportunist. So now you just weren't looking for crack dealers to rob. You were looking for anybody who might present themselves
with a lot of cash.
With a lot of cash. Talk about that.
Yeah, so that and that's what I used to do. So sometimes I go around. So now I'm to the point where I'm toting a pistol every day, everywhere I go. And so if I go in the store and somebody pull out a big wad of cash, go to pay for their stuff, I might not get anything. I might just trail them out. And then if they go to their car and they don't jump in fast enough and leave, when I get an opportunity, nobody around, I'll go ahead and rob them.
As you've gotten older, have you thought at all about, because I have a feeling you might, have you thought at all about the fear that you instilled in people all those times?
Oh, yes, definitely. most definitely.
I mean, back then you had no conscience for it.
Nothing at all.
But
and
when
I
did-
didn't even think about how scared they were. You know, at the time, you feel powerful, you know, and that's the thing about it. You know, with the robbery, it was more of a power kick too than it was the money.
So there was a thrill to all of it.
Yeah, because I really couldn't spend it on a lot of things because my mom didn't play in it. It wasn't come around the house with a whole bunch of expensive stuff and not be able to explain it. So, you know, I had to get, when I do rob somebody, I have to buy small stuff, and, you know, and go get me a couple outfits here, then get some jewelry and hide it, you know.
So throughout all this, you're hiding it from your mother.
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
Right, because I asked you the question,
not tolerate
why
that.
did you do these robberies? And you said, well, for the money, but then you also said it gave you a rush.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah, so it's something about, you know, having a gun, having control, you know, and forcing somebody to do your bidding. It just made you feel powerful, you know. And then the excitement, the danger, and everything that comes with it, you know.
Thousands of people will watch this interview. So what advice do you have for them so that, you know, they're aware and don't do stupid things that set them up to be robbed like that? Obviously,
Yeah.
one is don't pull out a big wad of cash.
Don't flash a lot of cash and lots of expensive jewelry. And so you make yourself a target, because if you don't look like you have anything, nobody wants to try to just rob you and say, hey, man, you don't have. You can have $10,000 on you, but if you got on some pants and a T-shirt, you know, and you're not looking flashy, and you're not driving in a fancy car, nobody's really going to try to rob you. For what? That's a waste of time. A chance you might be going to prison for nothing. Now, you might have a few people desperate out there that might do that. There's a couple addicts or something. But for the most part, just don't flash it.
So you did 50.
Or if you are, you're gonna do it somewhere in a very public place, you know. And that was another thing I used to do. So like if I was going to go out, I would never wear my jewelry and stuff until after I get to the club. Then I put it on.
Okay.
Right.
So you did 50 or 60 robberies successfully. You never got caught.
Never got caught.
So, but you said you were more lucky than good.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yes, because I never planned these things, you know. And there was no planning in it. No.
Ever?
No scheme ever. No
You would
scheme
just see an opportunity and you would go for
I
it.
would go for it. No mask, nothing. I was.
And you said you had a lot of small robberies where you would rob a guy at gunpoint. He had no money and he was wearing fake gold, and you were
Yeah.
risking a life sentence
life
using a
sentence.
gun.
And it never dawned on me at that time that I never had been incarcerated, so prison never crossed my mind.
So how many of these robberies would you say you committed over the course of that period of time before going to prison?
Probably in a 2-year span, I probably about 50 or 60.
That's what
robberies.
And in the same sort of geographic area?
No, so I was kind of all over. So from Palm Beach to
Okay.
Oh, so you would drive other places just and then you would look for people.
Well, sometimes I might not be actually looking. I might just be in those areas
Right.
and see an opportunity.
Right.
Hey,
All right, now you're
I'm
sick.
ready to leave now, so I might as well go to get him. Sometimes I would drive looking for something, you know, so I might go like on drug strolls and stuff like that and look for guys who selling drugs. Like, hey, who's selling parlays? Because I know the guys make the most money.
So 50 or 60 robberies, you probably terrorized people. A woman might not even, she may think she's being raped. I mean, she doesn't know. They just don't know.
Yeah.
You're 50 years old. You were 15 years old doing that. Can you believe today that you were that same person?
Well, knowing me, I know that it was. I could never be that same person again, but
Right.
but knowing who I was, at that time, yeah. But the part about it is nobody in my family actually believed that I did the crime that I did.
It was a big shock and surprise to them?
Yeah, and I'm talking about for years and years. I'm talking about until I got out. Some of them still didn't believe it. They were like, no, because
Why is that, you think?
because of that double life I lived, you know. And,
It was such a double life.
Yeah, and I got like I got a good heart, you know. And so I always had a good heart and compassionate. And so, you know, I cut the old lady next door, both of them. I cut the grass every
Right.
weekend for free, you know. And you know, when they try to pay me, I'm like, no, I'm okay, you know. And I did it really just out of the.
This was your
sheer feeling,
business.
because they were single, older women, you know what I'm saying? And they didn't have anyone to do it, so I do it. It didn't cost me nothing but a little energy.
This became your business. So
Yeah, he's like a big teddy bear kind of guy.
Yeah.
Nice and affable and
Okay, but let's talk now. Age 16, this is your
life.
downfall. March 31st, 1988.
Yeah.
You got a street
17.
you got a street beef. And you said there's somebody looking, so you hear somebody's looking for you.
Yeah.
Why were they looking for you?
So we got into a fight with some guys at school, some guys from another school that came there, and we got in a fight with them. And so one of the guys, he ended up getting like his ear split, and so one of the females that was there that they came out there with told the school officer that we had pistol whipped the guy, but we didn't. Nobody pistol whipped. It was just a fight. And so they had to take it at face value. So they wanted to take us to jail. So we ran. And the resource officer was like, "Hey, yeah, I'm not gonna chase you. They'll catch you when you catch you." But one guy didn't run, and he went to jail. And so when he got out, this some female that we knew, she said that he was looking for us, and that the reason he was the only one went to jail because we snitched on him, and this and that. And it's probably she fabricated the whole thing,
right.
But we never saw him. But we were looking for him because I know this guy had done some robberies before, so I knew his capabilities. So if he's looking for me, then I got to go find him.
You said you had to now, at this point, he's looking for you, so now it's time for street justice.
Yeah.
What is street justice?
Street justice means I got to get you before you get me.
Dog eat dog.
Yeah.
Would you have killed him?
Yeah, more than likely.
But you never found him.
But I never found him that day,
So you go looking for him. And you end up over in Davie, Florida, in a neighborhood you called Klan City.
Yeah.
Tell us about, why do they call it Klan City?
So in the 80s in Davie, Florida at the time, it was a known fact that there was a large Klan faction in Davie at that time there. Probably half the police force was Klan, to be honest with you.
Right.
And so at that time, it was a known fact. And I went to school at Nova, so I was right there in Davie. So I saw this on a regular basis,
So you're over there, you're in a stolen car, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The car breaks down.
Yes.
So you're on the street and some rednecks come by.
Yeah.
And there's a
the
confrontation.
Truck and
Talk about that. What was the confrontation about?
So they were just riding by and like, "Hey, what you nigga boys doing out there?" Huh? F you, we shoot a bird and all that good stuff.
Right.
And he's like, "Oh yeah? Well, you boys just sit right there. I'll be right back. Go and get a couple of my friends. We're going to have a talk with you." And they drive off in their truck. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, first we're like, "Man, he just talking to me." I'm like, "You know what?
Let's get out of here."
We are in Davie. I say, we don't want to be a part of a lynching.
So now you got to get out of Klan City in Davie. Your stolen car broke down. You need another car out.
Yeah.
So what happens?
So we decide we're going to take a car. Well, I decided that we're going to take a car. I'm going to say nobody else. It was me. I decided that we were going to take a car.
You're going to jack a car.
Somebody. Man, we're just going to jack somebody for a car and get back home. Because my co-defendant, he lived in Deerfield at the time, And so we had to get all the way back to Deerfield and Fort Lauderdale. So we went over there by the college. So we saw some people out there, but it was like a little too many people out there. So we walked around the corner on the little back road behind there and seen a couple cars that stopped at the stop sign. And I said, "Okay, I'm getting tired of walking, so this is going to be it." So we go up to the car. So the guy, he rolled up the window. So I run around to the passenger side and open the door, and I stick the gun in his face. And I'm like, "Get out the car." He's like, No. I'm like, "Get out the car." So I tried to grab him. So he said, "No." So he tried to grab the gun. And when I was backing out, it's like an instinct thing. I just pulled the trigger and shot him.
So then what happens?
And so then as soon as I back out the car, when I look up, there's a Davie police cruiser coming around the corner.
Did he see what happened?
She saw everything.
And then what happened?
And so I pulled the guy out of the car. We jumped in the car. We drove off. There was a couple of blocks, and we crashed out on 84. Car stalled out, wouldn't start back. So we got out, ran. So we hid the back. At that time, there was big canal down there, just off State Road 84 and Davie Road Extension.
So you crashed the car.
Yeah.
On State Route 84, and you jump the guardrail and you run down by the canal and you're hiding.
Yeah.
And then they bring out the dogs.
Yeah.
And then it's all over.
Yeah, so it's a little hunt for about an hour and a half. And the guy even told me that we were just about to give up. I had found me like a little niche that was like dug out in the canal that I could hide in pretty much. And then on the last, I guess the wind must have blown, and the dog smelt me on the last one and on the last run, and that's how they caught me.
So they arrest you. They take you to the Davie Police Department.
Yeah.
And what happened?
And so then they questioned me. Then they asked me the mom. They asked for my mom's number and stuff. Say, "Call your mom," this and that there. So they called her, asked her could she questioned me about a murder, this and that there, and she didn't know really what was going on. She thought that I had witnessed a murder, and she was like, "Okay." So she gave them permission to question me.
without an attorney present.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you had just turned 17 years old
Yeah,
about a month
in
earlier.
February, yeah.
So they're questioning you about a first-degree murder and a robbery, and you probably told them everything they wanted to know.
Yeah, pretty much.
Do you think they were a little deceptive with your mother in terms of
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
So they send you to the Broward Juvenile Detention Center, but then because you were charged with first-degree murder, you were direct filed.
Yes.
Meaning, even though you had just turned 17, you're being treated as an adult.
Yes.
So then they transfer you over to Broward County Jail.
Yes.
What was that like? You had just turned 17.
Yeah. And so it was scary because it's the first time being arrested, and anything. And now I'm not in detention, I'm going to the county jail facing a murder and armed robbery. And so I don't really know what to expect, And I know, if anything, from judging from the detention center, those guys just fight all day long just for no reason, just to be fighting, just because they can, because they're young, a lot of energy built up.
You were in a juvenile cell?
Yes.
With how many guys were with you?
So they had 3 cells for juveniles. One was like for lockup, and 2 of them for like open population. And I want to say it's probably because they had people sleeping on the floor and everything. It was overcrowded. And so it was probably around maybe about 60 people in each cell.
Wow. So then you're awaiting trial. You wait 18 months for a trial.
Yes.
But you pleaded guilty,
So
correct?
I pleaded guilty, yes.
You have a public defender?
Yeah. Well, no, I had a attorney. So once you have a murder charge, they will supply you an attorney, but they're doing that at a low rate, so you're not going to get a good attorney.
Right. I know there's certain attorneys that take whatever the state pays them.
Exactly.
So you had a private attorney that was accepting the state rate.
Exactly.
Was he a good attorney?
He probably was a good person, but it was a lot of things he could have done better. So he never even challenged the issue that they questioned me without my mom and that they deceived my mom and stuff. So he never filed any motions to raise.
Yeah, that never got into the equation in the trial at all.
Never.
So you're convicted. Well, you plead guilty. They sentence you to life in prison with a 25 years mandatory.
Yeah, and that's another thing he tricked me with that too. He told him, he said, listen, they want to sentence you to 25 to life. He said, you're young right now. You can do 25 and you'll be out. This and that. So he had me under the impression that once I complete the 25 mandatory, that I would get out.
Right.
So he didn't, maybe he didn't know the parole system. So he might have thought that parole was automatic. So maybe he didn't know the parole system at all. And so this what he was like. So this what I went in taking the plea for, thinking that, hey, okay, 25 years is a long time, but I can do it. I'll be 42.
He didn't tell you that after 25 you become eligible. And that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Let me ask you, you committed a lot of armed robberies.
Yeah.
Did you ever contemplate that you would have to shoot somebody? You'd have to kill somebody in the course of an armed robbery? Or did that thought ever come to your mind? Because it seemed like it was, you struggled with the guy, you pulled back and...
Yeah, so I knew it could have been a possibility, but it was more if somebody else had a weapon and they pulled out one, while I was in the middle of a robbery, I would probably have to shoot them because I felt like I had the gun, I was powerful. They would do what I say.
Right.
And that's that juvenile thinking, my immature mindset at the time.
And see, we come back to that issue of juveniles being convicted of horrific crimes and sentencing them as adults, even though you clearly were not a mature guy who really thought out the consequences of this. So you were sentenced as harshly as a 45-year-old man would have been would have been sentenced.
With probably diminished reasoning skills.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, because the average person doesn't really mature to that of an adult until sometime between 18 and 29. You had just turned 17.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you go to prison at the age of 17. Where was the first prison you went?
So they sent me to the South Florida Reception Center, and I stayed there for maybe about 2 months. Usually it's 30 days, but they had a German measles outbreak at that time, so they stopped all transfers until everybody got the vaccine. And then they sent me to Hendry, which is in Immokalee. And that was like an eye-opener for me then, because now I'm around all adults, And they had a dorm that they had us in for just the people that were under 21. And the only reason they put us in one dorm because they had a special meal for us at that time, so we had to get a certain kind of milk that morning and juice at that afternoon. So they kept us all in the dorm together, but pretty much as soon as the doors open, it's just adults and us.
How violent was it for you? You're 17 years old. You're a big guy. You can protect yourself unless 5 guys are holding you down.
Yeah.
But how violent was it?
It was violent. It was violent. And especially at that time during the 80s and early 90s, prison was a lot more violent. So the smaller offenses carried a larger consequence, I should say, than they did later on in my time, you know.
You told me 95% of all the problems in prison sort of emanate from gay activity, gambling, and drugs.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
So a lot of the, I guess you could say supply and demand if you look at it from the business aspect. So only X amount of, you know, feminine homosexuals versus X amount of a whole lot of the masculine homosexuals. And so it's usually a fight once this guy's so-called girlfriend or whatever is messing with some other guy on the low or something, so that escalates into violence. Sometimes guys just want the same one and they fight over them and stab each other up and all kind of stuff.
How much pressure do new inmates deal with when it comes to being pressured for, you know, homosexual activity? Is it super common?
Yeah, well, at that time it was. Nowadays, not so much. But when I definitely back in the, like I said, in the early 90s, the 80s, early 90s, it was definitely prevalent.
How difficult is it for somebody who's not homosexual to avoid that?
Avoid it? I don't think you can avoid it.
What?
You have to deal with it. I mean, you're going to be tried at some place.
You're going to get tried.
Yeah, at some time or place, you know.
And that was one of your issues because you got tried and you set the precedent early. You said even that you overreacted in a violent way. Talk about that.
So once I noticed that, you know, and from talking to some of the older guys, you know, they kind of give me the game, you know, watch the guys. They like to play the little games and they set you up, this and that. They don't take stuff from them because they'll later on they'll come back and feel like you owe them, you're obligated, and then they'll press you for sexual favors, this and that there. He say, so to avoid a problem later on, you know,
Well, what were the games they played with you?
And they played little sex games. So they would what they call sex games. So they say little stuff like, well, you must have been doing squats or something. You've been working out. Well, you looking fat back there.
And then they would touch you and they would touch you.
And if you let that go, then they'll come back, you know, like, boy, yeah, you're looking good, and pat you on the butt or something, you know.
So how do you not let it go?
So the first time, what I did was the first time they said something, I punished them, you know, physically, you know. And then like, hey man, I was just we wasn't just talking, and I'm talking about, you know, and I try to do it in the worst way possible, so that way not just that you know, but so that everybody else knows.
So when you say you do it in the worst way possible, you didn't just hit them once.
No, they hit them once. I try to beat them down, try to hurt them, injure them, send them to medical or something.
And that stopped the advancements moving forward for you at that facility?
Yeah, you know, you do it a couple times, and then they know, hey, that guy don't play that. And so they call the bandits at that time, they call them booty bandits at that time. The booty bandits know, hey, no, don't try him because Jit gone.
Were you afraid maybe they had weapons on them or something? Was there a lot of weapons in that prison?
Oh, yeah. And that was always an issue, too, you know, guys. So other older guys, you know, some of them that had the head on right, you know, or thought they had the head on right anyway, they were like, well, listen, man, you know you just beat that guy up real bad. His pride ain't going to let him accept that. So you need to get you a shank. Hell, you know, they might give you one or send you to whoever sell them. Hey, this guy here selling shanks for $10 or whatever. And at that time, they had cash money in the prison system. You know, so you go over there and you pay the guy working in the welding shop or whoever was selling them, and they'll sharpen you up some nice piece of metal, get it, and then you got to hide it somewhere.
In that prison, do you think everyone was armed?
Not everyone, but the majority, the vast majority.
Wow.
I mean, you've sort of answered this next question, but how did you survive 30 years in Florida prisons? Because I see so many people die. There's suicide, there's murder, there's HIV. It's just and there's just unhealthy conditions. How did you survive 30 years in Florida prisons?
So, like I said, a lot of luck, man. God was looking out for me. So,
a lot of luck.
Yeah, good in the beginning stages, because like I did some things that, you know, some guys could have probably came back and killed me for. You know, like I said, I Because when I took things to I didn't bother anybody, though. That's my thing. I didn't really bother anybody. I didn't go out and antagonize anyone. But if something happened, I was going to take it to whatever level I needed to take it to get the job done and make sure that it's never an issue again.
Well, you said you had no bad associations, correct?
Yeah, no bad. But I gambled.
You gambled.
So I end up getting into situations, gambling too. That, like I said, that's another one of the.
What happened? People don't pay their debts and violence erupts.
Yeah.
Did you earn it all? We've had lots of guests on this program that sold drugs, that
I was into that
had
time.
Various cons in prison that they were earning.
Yeah.
Did you have anything you did like that
so
nature?
Gambling. I sold a little drugs also.
So you sold weed when you were in prison.
Yeah, I sold some weed.
How did you get the weed?
So I had a roommate that had a connect, which was an officer that used to bring the weed to him. And then I buy
a corrections officer?
Yes.
Okay, so you get a corrections officer. Somebody on the outside is going to have to pay the officer on the outside, and then they bring the weed in?
Yes. Or it depends on which area you're talking about. So during the cash money area, when there was cash in prison, then they could just pay the officer themselves.
Right.
Because they get the money.
Right, but there's no cash in prison anymore since
So
about
once they take the
1992.
cash, yeah, so it's just like 90. Well, I think it was like 94, 95.
Okay.
Something like that, yeah.
We've heard, Chris, how many times have we heard now this same sort of explanation that a guard, a police, even some have told us police officers
Correct.
would provide it inside. I mean, it's like it doesn't seem to be very uncommon to
No,
me.
it seems very common.
Yeah, that's because that's the only way you're really gonna get something in bulk. And you have some of the guys that get stuff through the visiting part, who they suitcase it, what they call sticking in the rectum. But you're only gonna get X amount of small amounts of stuff.
Right.
Maybe an ounce or two.
Right.
I've heard cases where you've got officers coming in with 1-2 pounds of marijuana.
Yeah.
I mean, I had one guy that paid a correction officer $3,000 on the outside to bring in 2 pounds.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff that was happening.
Yeah.
How much did an ounce of marijuana go for when you were at Belglade Correctional Institution?
So when I was at Belglade, an ounce was going more for like $200 an ounce.
$200 an ounce. Remember?
Wow.
When we were young, it was $30-$40 an ounce.
Yeah.
But in prison, I guess you can get whatever you want if you're willing to pay for it.
Yeah. And even at that time on the streets, maybe an ounce was probably like $70, $80, maybe even $90 an ounce. But you're more than doubling your money.
But K2 now, it's sort of chemicals with formaldehyde. It's killing people.
Terrible.
Is that taking over instead of marijuana?
Has taken over.
It has.
Yeah. So
Really?
Yeah. You can't even sell marijuana really. Unless you got a small little niche of people that don't like K2, and they might try some marijuana to get some in. But it's not even a profitable business because, like I said, you're gonna have 1 or 2 customers.
Right.
And unless they're buying in bulk. Like say, okay, well, get me an ounce in, and I'll pay you $400 or $500 or whatever.
And they're selling K2 by the gram.
Yeah, but now it's more serious drugs in prison.
It's the K2.
Okay. Yeah. So we got all right. So and you said about $100 a gram.
Yeah.
All right. So let me ask you this: what was describe to you? What was? We always hear about an inmate code. Is there an inmate code?
Depends on which area you're in. So it used to be, So it used to be a time where, if you and an officer weren't dealing, like doing some kind of drugs or something, then you really had no reason to talk to the officers, And if you did, then you were labeled as a snitch.
Okay.
So don't talk to the officers, generally speaking.
Yeah, But nowadays it's a little different. So the guys are a little more guys. A lot of guys that just like to be around officers and just talk to them and stuff. Maybe they want to talk about the streets or whatever. But when I first came to prison, it was no. If you're talking to the officer, you better be doing some dealing, some kind of dealing, or you're snitching. One or the other. Other than that, there was no other reason to be talking to the officers.
And before we segue into your transition, let me ask you this. The realities of living as an ex-convict. I mean, how hard is it? You did 30 years in prison. How hard is it for you on a daily basis?
To be honest with you, I feel so fortunate. But I know it's hard for some. But my life was set up to a point where I had a lot of support, So it really was kind of. It was really. Sometimes I sit back and think it was too easy, and I'm like, man, believe it or not, I've been out like 3.5, almost 3 years now. June will be 3 years, and I never even had to catch the city bus anywhere.
Was it hard to get a job?
Not really. I got a job like 2 weeks after I was out, working at a temp agency. So there are avenues. So now if you got limits on what you would do, then but I didn't have that kind of hang up. I was willing to take whatever. So I was working with a temp agency, working out to the convention center, cleaning up and setting up tables and stuff like that. Then setting up for events.
You just wanted to work.
I just wanted to work.
So you spent 8 years at Everglades Correctional Institution while I was running the Voices of Time Gavel Club, and then you were transferred into the Corrections Transition Program around 2008. Well, what year was that? 2000.
2017, like November, when I came back from port.
So did you request a transfer?
No.
Into the Corrections Transition Program, or because you were convicted and sentenced to life as a juvenile, you were resentenced under the new legislation, correct?
Yes.
How did that work?
And so they came out with new legislation. They looked at the psychology of the juvenile mindset, and saying that the brain development, that the brain wasn't fully developed really until like 24 to 26 years old. But Florida, you got to have a baseline somewhere, so they feel like 18, you're an adult. So that's where the baseline stops at. And so anybody before the age of 18, they had the opportunity to go back and have a resentencing hearing. Now, that doesn't mean that you couldn't get a life sentence, but they had a certain set of factors that they had to take in consideration, your upbringing, and the type of crime and all of that stuff there. And then base your sentencing on that kind of those alternative factors. So, when I first got sentenced, the judge had no discretion. It was either life or death. So those are the only options.
So, but you were actually fortunate because legislation changed for rescheduling, but no sooner than it changed, it kind of changed again. But you had already been granted a release, correct?
Yeah. So I took a plea in 2017. I took a plea to be resentenced, but part of the recommendation was that the prosecutor wanted me to go to the CPT program. And
okay.
And so I explained to him, I'm like, it's not a program that we can just mandate like that. I say it's dealt with the parole commission.
Right.
And they only take people that are recommended by the parole commission. And since I'm not going to be on parole, so he like, no, I really want you to take this program, because I read up on it. So he read in my jacket where I was trying to get into the program when I was parole eligible. And I was writing the parole board trying to find out what I had to do to get into the program. And it was telling me that, it's a state program. We don't control it. So write your classification. Then when I tell my classification say, well, the parole board has put you in there. I'm like, well, okay.
But so technically they put you in the Corrections Transition Program, but then you were released in June of 2018, and you're not even subjected to parole anymore, correct? No. So you didn't even have to go to a halfway house.
No.
Your sister picked you up and took you home.
Took me home.
And that was.
Have you had great support from your family since?
Awesome support. Like I said, I never even had to catch a city bus anywhere since I've been out. Even from day one, everybody was there to help me.
Blessed in that regard.
Yes, highly blessed. I truly appreciate them every day.
And you've got a good job. What are you doing?
So right now I work at a call center, and when I do Medicaid claims for providers. So I'm on like an escalation team. So when the claims are messed up, if it's something that I can fix, I can fix it and pay it, up to a certain limit, dollar limit or whatever, and I can escalate it to the right department.
You were in prison a long time. Was it a culture shock getting out and seeing how sort of the world has changed since you?
Definitely. I mean, just even riding by my old house, my mom's old house, because they lost the house, and it's the whole street, that whole neighborhood, everything's different, and everywhere I went at was different. I'm like, I remember something used to be over here, and like, oh yeah, that's been gone for 20 years, and said it. And something was over here, that was gone.
What was the biggest change for you?
The speed.
The speed. Everything moves so quickly.
Everything moves so quickly, and especially even like walking down the street, it kind of like was kind of fearful for me when cars were coming by, because in prison, everything's at walking speed,
right?
Or running at the most,
Never thought of that.
Yeah, and the cars coming by, I'm like, whoa, take a breath. You know, like, it's still kind of moving kind of fast. I'm like, man, why you ain't walk across the street? And I'm like, man, that thing look like it's coming a lot faster than maybe, you know. And so even just crossing the street was kind of like a little shock for me.
It was different.
Yeah.
And I heard a rumor you might be getting married in August.
Yes, most definitely. I will be getting married August the 7th.
And this your third, fourth marriage?
No, first.
First marriage. I knew that.
And tell us about your bride to be.
Actually, she was my high school sweetheart.
Really?
Yeah, before I came to prison, you know, and so she.
And you guys reconnected after prison?
Yeah, well, she always kept in contact with me, you know, over the course of these 30 years, you know.
Wow.
So we're always friends, you know, even during my incarceration.
That's nice.
Her name is Dion?
Yes, Dion.
And she was going to join us today, but then she couldn't, correct?
Yeah, she couldn't. We got our grandson down, and he was asleep, so she didn't want to wake him up.
Yeah. I was going to kid with you and say we should probably interview her. She's probably better looking than you.
Yes, she is. I mean, a lot of people out there look at me.
You're a fortunate man, I'm sure, to have met her.
Yeah, I am. I'm definitely blessed every day when I wake up late.
Well,
Did you know when you in prison all those years corresponding with her that you guys would get back together?
Not at all, because, you know, she had relationships, you know. She had 2 kids, you know. And at the time when I got out, she happened to be single at that time. You know, she had been single for a couple of years, you know. And I told her, I said, well, God would just let those people hold you down until I got out. That's all, you know. And that's why He got everybody out your way and cleared the path for me when I got out. Because I prayed for a good woman when I got out.
Well, you got one apparently.
Well,
Good
Barry,
for you.
I hope you can join us again. We've got to wrap it up in a moment here, but I hope you can join us again. You were an outstanding guest, and we congratulate you on getting out of prison and your success, and of course your marriage to Dion.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I definitely appreciate it.
Andy, any comments?
No, it's a great show. It's great to meet you, Barry, today, and another, you know, a lot of questions come to my mind, some of which we'll probably speak about next week during the open of our next show.
Well, that does it for today, and thank you all so much for tuning in for another episode of Men Going Home here at the studios of The Man Live in Miami. And a very special thank you to Ed Kossoff from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, who wrote, Chris, you are providing such a fascinating take on this not talked about topic that it's making me want to commit a minor offense, do my time, and be freed simply to talk to my old friend Chris Wolfe on Men Going Home. And thank you all so much for watching, and see you all next week here at Men Going Home.